Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, which I consider a higher title than secretary or senator, just so you know. I'm disappointed.
As a former governor.
That's right. Oh, yes, that's true. I'm disappointed, Mr. Secretary, with the budget, particularly for the National Park Service. First is what materials we've been given. This is the budget justification for the National Park Service for the 2025 budget that's submitted to Congress so that we have something we can work from and work with. That's 2025. This is what we've been given this year for 2026. That's an insult to the Congress. That's not adequate to give us the data that we need in order to make the oversight decisions, because we don't know the details of what's being done. There's some boilerplate in here about how we're going to make things more efficient. It's hard for me to understand how gutting America's best idea isn't America's worst idea. A 37% cut in the National Park Service budget, which was already underfunded, I don't believe is responsible. The word stewardship has come up in this hearing several times. That ain't stewardship. Here's some data. This is visitation at our national parks going back to 2010. The blue bars are visitation. The orange is staff at the National Park Service. So you can see there was already a growing disparity back in 2010. This is where staffing was. This is where visitation was. Here's where we are as of this budget, right here. That's where we are as of this budget. We were already woefully understaffed, and you're talking about cutting the budget by another third. Now, my real question is why? The $1.2 billion you're cutting from the National Park Service is devastating to the National Park Service. It doesn't amount to anything in terms of our federal budget. I did a calculation. If our federal budget was the height of this room, what you're cutting from the National Park Service is the combined height of 2 credit cards. In other words, to save virtually no money from the federal budget, we're devastating one of America's treasures. And that's what I don't understand. And you yourself a few minutes ago said we don't have the data, you don't have the visitation data. This is ready, fire, aim. How about waiting a year, developing the data, finding out what it is, because you can't convince me that a detailed analysis of the National Park Service took place in the last couple of months to justify this pitiful submission to this committee. So I'm anxious to hear. We all know the term bang for the buck. This is damage for the buck. This is huge damage to the Park Service for a very minimal return in terms of reduction of the deficit, reduction of our federal budget. Why in the world, given your commitment to the national parks, the new park, the Teddy Roosevelt Park in your state, why did you let them do this?
Well, Senator, I want to just first, appreciate the chart that you're holding up behind there. I believe that number, if I can see it correctly, probably is the full-time staffing as opposed to the summer and seasonal. I think that we actually have, it's a mix. I think that line I'm trying to see there.
Well, you allowed more seasonals for this year, but I understand only half of them have been hired, and we're in the summer right now.
Well, more than half have been hired, but I think, again, this is a mix. Again, when I just got back from a trip to Alaska, I was at Kenai Fjords. This is a, beautiful and amazing park. The road gets plowed in May. It snows over in November. This is a classic case where we need a lot of staffing. Cruise ships are stopping in Seward. They get, hundreds of thousands of visitors over a 3-4 month period. And then in the wintertime, the visitor centers aren't even open. So we have to figure out a way to be able to do flex staffing. It's not just as simple as the raw number. And the one number that I was able to get—
the raw number, there may be details in here, but it's pretty unmistakable, the trend on this chart. And
well, but again, the other thing,
I don't understand. You're saving a very small amount of money. You're gutting looked it up last night. The National Park Service is the most popular federal agency. the most popular federal agency. Why in the world would you target this agency, particularly when you yourself in your testimony today said, I don't have the data?
Well, we're working.
That's ready, fire, aim. Get the data, understand the details of the budget. Give us something like this, and then we can decide what the plan should be, to echo the vice chair. What's the plan for doing this in a thoughtful way, not an arbitrary way of, all probationary employees and that kind of thing?
Well, in that thick book that you have there, I'm certain that there's one thing that's missing, which is how many of those people actually work in a park? Because we spent 8 weeks this spring rebuilding all the HR data to find out, of all the people you have in your chart, how many work in a park. Because the real issue that citizens want is, do I have an interpretive person? Do I have a ranger? Do I have, are the bathrooms clean? And so part of that is making sure that we have fewer people working, in places like Washington, D.C., more people working in the parks. I believe that we can reduce what we spend in overhead in the park and have more people actually working in the parks. And in a place like Yellowstone this summer, there are more people right now on the ground in Yellowstone than there were 3 years ago.
And I'd like to see that plan before you submit a budget that cuts the budget by 37%. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I would just want to say one thing, Mr. Chairman. It's one thing that we're in a sad point in America if we say that cutting $1 billion is meaningless, or it's as thin as a piece of paper. We're all Americans. We are all part of a budget thing. Last year, this country spent $2,000 billion more than we brought in. That's what a $2 trillion deficit is. And it's to think that we can't find savings in every agency, particularly when we've got, decades-old IT systems and way too many people in overhead. I mean, we just have to all agree that we can be more efficient and still deliver great services at places like our national parks. We can do both of those things. It's not an either or. These are false trade-offs. We can have better experiences at the park, better staffing at the parks, and we can have fewer people working for the national park system. My best guess is that barely half of the people of that number actually work in a park. The rest are in some other jobs.
Part of the responsibility of the National Park Service is stewardship and resource management, not necessarily being park rangers. That's part of the responsibility of the Organic Act of the National Parks. And I'd point out that $600 billion of that deficit that you mentioned could be covered by better enforcement at the IRS of a lot of people not paying their taxes. $600 billion, that's the estimate that the deficit could be reduced. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.